The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions, and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Pump up the volume on your parenting with Parent Pump Radio. Tune into something different that makes a difference. At Parent Pump Radio, instead of a ripple, we choose to create a splash. Get energized, get inspired, and get informed with how to parent in the new millennium. With your host and parent coach super guide, Jacqueline T.D. Wynn.
Hi, this is Jacqueline T.D. Wynn. Welcome to Parent Pump Radio. Our show is all about dynamic family leadership, financial freedom, and leaving a profound legacy for our children. Parents, are you working 8 to 6 and scared of market crash, wondering how you'll fund retirement or college fees? Want to earn stable, cash-flowing, appreciating income? Well, we teach parents how to create a safe, personalized real estate portfolio, generate $10,000 plus a month, one house at a time in 10 years or less, involve the children in creating wealth. So you can invest alone, but when the family's involved, you empower your kids to become financially literate and able to manage their own lives. And when you have a family business, you and your kids always have something to talk about. So wealth building brings families together, kids, teens, and parents. And we help because we find, acquire, renovate, and even manage the properties for you. So you get to build knowledge and wealth in as little as 2 hours a month. So schedule your Is Real Estate Right for Me educational call today. Go to my website at integrativeminds.com, and there you'll be able to book an appointment time and even order one of my or all of my 3 books. Our show is available on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, and syndicated on rethinkradio.org, oneideaway.com, and ARM Radio. Our guest today is a parenting specialist who has been serving families for over a decade. Besides being a mother of 2, she also has a master's degree in clinical psychology, a certification in positive discipline, and has provided services as an ADHD coach, in-home mentor, and therapist. Currently, she teaches parents hands-on tools for raising responsible, resilient, confident children and helping parents find the time and energy to incorporate all of these tools into their lives. It's my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce you to Rachel Bailey. Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me here.
Oh, thank you. So you must really love what you do. Just reading from your bio that you must be really passionate.
I absolutely am passionate about reducing the stress of parents, 100%, because I feel like we're in this society where everyone is feeling overwhelmed and overworked, and that impacts our kids. And so I want to make life easier for parents. Yes, I'm very passionate about that.
Yeah, and I think it's so important because as parents, we maintain the level of energy, stress in our family, because our children are always going to feel stressed, especially when they're going through their school system. They're kind of looking to us for that guidance of where I should be. And if we maintain what we know, I think it's so helpful for them.
It is incredibly helpful. Yeah, they're absolutely looking at us. And even when they're not looking at us, they sense us.
Yes.
So they can feel our energy, whether we're anxious or calm or in control or not. Absolutely. I agree with you.
Yeah. So before we get in some of the technical question, I just want to know a little bit about you in the sense of why is this so important to you?
So I actually didn't start out in the field of psychology in helping parents. I was actually studying to be a neuropsychologist. That's what I wanted to do. I've always been really interested in the brain. And then what happened was I was in graduate school, I was getting my PhD, and I got pregnant. So I couldn't do it all. I ended up stopping my PhD program, although eventually maybe I'll go back and get that. But as I was, working and figuring out what I wanted to do, I had done some time as a therapist, and I had worked with a lot of, improving behavior and things like that. But at some point I realized there was this need that parents had for the really practical stuff. Like there are a lot of therapists out there are a lot of counselors, but at the time when I began, there weren't a lot of people helping parents figure out how to raise kids who not only are, behave well, but also who are resilient and can handle the fact that life isn't always going to go their way. And also kids who feel good about themselves. There's a lot of unhappy kids these days. So I figured I would stop, going the traditional route. And I ended up just building a practice working with parents. I do love it.
Oh, good. I used to do the corporate stuff. I think you and I talked about this offline, corporate leadership. But then I felt like it's the home that we got to start with. All of these boss screaming at their employees, it all started at home somehow. So it starts with the parenting.
I absolutely, obviously I'm biased, but I couldn't agree more. That's why I left that field, because I was like, gosh, if we get the parents, I found I have a bigger impact on a home if I work with the parents than with the kids.
Absolutely. I feel like the kids already know it's us that we got to get on the page.
That's so funny. In some ways, that's probably true, or maybe a little of both.
Yeah. Given that we're all so busy as parents, do you have any tips for making parents feel a little less exhausted?
Absolutely. I think one of the things with parenting is that we have things outside of parenting as parents. We have a lot going on in our lives. And so we're often reacting to our kids. And when we are reacting to their behavior or to their, last minute planning, whatever it is that's going on, we waste so much time and energy that it just creates this cycle where we're reactive and then we're more depleted. The kids sense that their behavior is negative, and then we're reacting and we get in this cycle. So one of the things I do, basically every parent that I work with is busy and overwhelmed when they come to me, is I start to help them understand kids' behavior and motivation and to start doing things more proactively and stop being so reactive, which takes a lot of energy, and do a few things proactively. And it's amazing how much more time and energy parents have when they can set up a few things more proactively.
So proactively, what's proactive parenting?
So proactive parenting is where instead of responding to a child's behavior, let's say you ask them to put on their shoes 5 times because you have to get out of the house, and then you get angry and you lose your cool because they're not listening to you. Proactive parenting is about thinking outside of that moment. Why isn't my child putting on their shoes? Or why are they speaking disrespectfully? Or why aren't they cleaning their room? Understanding the reason and giving them what they need to do what they're supposed to do in the first place. So you're not reacting once the behavior's already happened. That's reactive parenting. Proactive parenting is understanding those things that are causing problems in your home, finding the cause of those problems, and solving them ahead of time so you don't have to deal with them over and over.
Obviously, in the moment, like if I'm trying to get, my kids are teenagers now, but I'm looking back when they were little, if I'm trying to get them their shoes on and they're not, and we got to get somewhere and we're running late. So you're saying I should deal with that before that moment comes?
100%. Especially, and by the way, I work with parents of teens too, so it's just different. Obviously, they're still lagging to get out of the house. It's just usually the device or they won't get out of bed. I mean, it's different reasons, but it's all the same stuff. So, but yeah, ultimately, it's about if there's something that keeps happening over and over, like they're not getting their shoes on or they're doing projects late, whatever it is, recognizing those instances where you're spending a lot of energy and figuring out the why behind the behavior. Why are they doing that? Which is really where I'm an expert. A lot of parents usually start with an idea of why. That's where I come in because I can really explain why. And then once you figure out the reason, there's a solution, and then you're not dealing with the same issue over and over.
And then in the moment parenting.
In the moment parenting is where you're actually responding. It's more of the reactive parenting.
Okay, got it. Okay.
So I call this, I have a podcast, and I talk about this all the time on my podcast. We have Bandaid parenting, which is really in the moment parenting. It's really just trying to get that behavior to stop. And often it's from our place of anger or frustration or annoyance. That's all in the moment parenting. And I call it Bandaid parenting because you're constantly trying to put a Band-Aid on the situation rather than actually finding the solution to the problem. And when we're Band-Aid parenting, it just takes too much energy. When we're already depleted, it's a waste of time and energy.
Okay. So as parents and technology, I think all the parents out there have the same problem as I do, is they're on their phone.
Correct.
How do we proactive parent that to reduce all of that screen time?
I love that. So you want to think about, first of all, why are they? Well, first you want to figure out proactively, what are your goals? What would you like if you'd like them to be on it less? That's the first thing. Then you want to figure out, well, why aren't they meeting that goal to begin with? And so what you want to understand is, because I was studying to be a neuropsychologist, I talk a lot about the brain. So if you don't set your home up with clear guidelines about when they're allowed to be on the device and when they're not, if you're not consistent with that, then they're going to be on them all the time. Right. If you want them to be on them less, you actually need to have clear guidelines. Now, for younger kids, what I say is you want to let them know when they're allowed to be on the screens. Up until about age 7 or 8, you say, this is when you're allowed on the screens, and you make that a consistent time. The more consistent you are, the less kids will resist and the less they'll crave it at other times. That's the way the brain works. If our brains get used to this is our device time, then they don't fight it all the time. Now, with older kids, like teenagers, I actually think it's really hard to say you can only be on it at this time. So what I say for parents of teenagers is have a consistent screen-free time for the entire family when they're not allowed to be on screens. Be very consistent. And what it does is it teaches your child how to use that time wisely. And it also allows them to predict when they're not going to be on screen so they can plan their homework time. It actually teaches them a lot of skills, but it also makes them resist you less when you say, hey, it's not screen time. If you are consistent about it, they resist less. That's just the way the brain works. So that's one example of how we get kids off of screens.
Okay, so you just block off a time, like maybe that's the family time, and then there's no screen time at that time.
Correct.
Okay.
And the more consistent you are, the more their brains are going to get used to that. And the less they're going to resist and the more they're going to plan for that. I actually had a mom very recently, like 2 weeks ago, tell me that she overheard her daughter, who was 16, telling her friend, I'm not going to be able to talk to you at that time because we don't do screens at that time in our family. Okay. She was like, oh my gosh, I never thought my 16-year-old would say that.
After school, when they get home, should it be like the family time where we're having snacks? Or should I give them that time to just kind of be alone since they've been around so many energies at school?
Yes. I actually think after school they need to wind down, but winding down for kids looks different. It looks different for every child. Some need to connect with other people. Some need quiet. Some need physical releases. So it actually depends on the child, but generally I think after school is wind down time, whatever that looks like for them.
Okay. What happens if you don't have time or energy as a parent to be this proactive? We're running around trying to figure out why they're doing what they do.
Yeah. What you find is that being proactive actually saves you time and energy. We think that, I hear this, I have worked with thousands of parents at this point, and I hear this about 90% of the time. Well, Rachel, I don't have time for that. But when parents take, do a session with me, although you can do this on your own, you don't need to pay someone for this. But if you take maybe an hour and you actually come up with some proactive strategies, that hour is going to buy you 5, 6, 7 hours in the week. And so much more energy. So this actually saves time and energy. It doesn't take more time and energy.
That's a good point. Kind of like what that saying, teach them how to fish, and then they can fish on their own.
Yes.
Then you're not having something each time. So that's a very good point.
Absolutely. Yes. You just figure out what the proactive strategies need to be. You implement them, and it takes so much less time. When parents come to me and depleted and exhausted, I do an accounting with them of how much energy they're currently spending. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, they're like, oh my gosh, it's amazing how much less energy I'm spending.
Yeah. Sometimes I think just dealing with kids' behavior is what tires us out, like you were saying. What tips do you have that we can use to motivate kids to listen to us more, to act more responsible? And I think this probably has that teenage years written all over
all
it.
Years, yes.
but
all years.
But I get these teenagers, they tend to, when my kids were younger, they just seemed more excited, more motivated.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But now, as they get older, more stress are involved, and it just depletes them.
Absolutely. And it's often their behavior or their responses that are depleting us. So one of the things that you need to know about teenagers is that, they're motivated by totally different things. Young kids are motivated more by sort of silliness and excitement and connection with their parents. That shifts during adolescence.
Yes. There
are two things that motivate teens: respect and control, age-appropriate control. So here's what I always suggest if you're having an issue with your teen in some area where they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, is actually sitting down with them proactively, because you're doing so much fighting in the moment and it doesn't go well. Sitting down with them proactively and using what I call a joint problem-solving strategy. And this is you have to do it in a specific order, especially with teenagers, or it's not going to work, because they need respect and control. So you always want to connect first, give them some respect, and make sure that they feel connected to you. But then let's say the issue is that, in fact, why don't you give me what's an issue with the teen that you would want to address? I'll work through it with that.
I think what I hear consistently a lot with parents is their teens are so stressed out with homework. Mm-hmm. And we can't undo homework, because especially the high school years, because they get a lot of homework and they can't just not do it. Once they get stressed, they start crying, whatever it is, and then you're dealing with this reactive behavior, and then anything you say or do just adds fuel to the fire.
Yeah, that sounds like all the parents I work with too. And it's so funny how to get them out of that cycle. But the first place to start, just very generally, is sitting down with the teen more proactively and sort of setting a boundary and saying, you know what, we need to figure out this homework stress issue. That's basically the first step. You start when you're in a connected place. You set a boundary. We need to figure this out. The next step is always, I want to hear what this homework stress is like for you. You're getting into your teen's world with them. With teens especially, we do so much talking at them, and we try so hard to convince them to see our perspective. Yeah. Very few adults take the time to hear what teens' experiences are like. So you ask them what it's like for them, and you're going to get so much information, especially if you have a good relationship and they're opening up to you, about why it's stressful. And then the next step, once you've really heard them without telling them why they're wrong or fixing it yet, then you say, okay, let's come up with a plan, given everything you just told me and the fact that we can't get rid of homework. What's a plan that we can use to help you with the stress? Now, I know from working with teens and parents of teens that often it's about time management or organization, but you're coming up with a plan with them. You're giving them respect and you're giving them control. You do not need to come in and fix and solve it and tell them what the plan should be. You need to have your teen come up with the plan. And the last piece of this, and this is what parents love the most, is once you've come up with a plan with your teen, it's really your teen's plan, the last piece is to say, okay, what do you want me as your parent to do if you don't follow your plan? So it's ultimately empowering the teen to come up with the quote-unquote consequence so that the parent feels more in control because they already know ahead of time how to handle it, and the teen feels really in control because they were the one that came up with it. Yeah. So ultimately what that did is it set a boundary with your teen that we need to deal with the stress in a way that was respectful and gave them lots of age-appropriate control. So that's just one example of a strategy that you would use to help improve the behavior proactively, and then you know how to deal with it.
And then what do you do when you get that I don't know answer? Like, okay, well, what do you think would help? Yeah. I don't know. And then
you do, because genuinely teens tend not to know. So here's how I respond to that. It's kind of easy with teens because you can say something like, well, okay, can I put out some solutions? And your suggestions, they're not going to like.
No.
Generally, they're not going to like. But you use that to your advantage.
Okay.
And you say, well, here are mine. I would love to hear what yours are. And very often, because I've facilitated this type of conversation hundreds of times, very often when you give solutions they don't like, that motivates them to come up with things that they prefer instead. And teens usually go to one of two extremes. They either give a really, really tough consequence or they go a little bit too lenient. But either way, you can say, okay, let's try that for a week. Whatever your suggestion was, let's try it. We'll check in a week and see how it's going.
Okay. Yeah, because one of my irks is my daughter included, and I have lots of friends, same school. These kids will stay up till 2 a.m. to do homework. And I just think that's so damaging to the brain, considering they've been up since 6, maybe even earlier. If they have 0 period, probably 5 o'clock in the morning. And my thing is, you go to bed at 11. If you want to wake up at 4 a.m. to do homework, that's fine, because at least your body got a little recharge.
Yes, it's so true. But here's something really important to know about teens is that their executive functioning skills, which is basically their ability to manage their time and organize their stuff and break things into small pieces. Their executive functioning skills, are not on par with the demands that they have on them. Okay. So you can say to a teenager, you need to go to bed by 11, or I think you should go to bed by 11. They literally don't know how to manage their time to get in that downtime, which they really do need, and to break assignments into smaller pieces. They don't, most of them, I would say 75 to 80% of them don't have the skills to do that. So it's one thing to say, you should go to bed earlier. Even if they're like, yeah, I agree with you, they don't have the skills or the tools. And that's a big piece of what's going on. And if we don't proactively address this, it is not going to change. So remember I said there are things that cause behavior. This is one of the causes of that behavior.
So is that when you have to sit down with them and teach them how to break down their homework and time manage then?
That's exactly what you would do. It's exactly right. And depending on your relationship, it gets more complicated with teens because some teens are like tuned out and they don't want to hear their parents. And then I would personally take a step back with that family and say, how do we get your relationship to the point where you then can be someone who has more influence over your teen? So often when families come to me, I do have to take a step back and help them build their influence with their teen.
Okay. So what can we do to make sure we're still parenting consistently, like we talked about, with our core values, even when we're worn out?
Yes. And that is the case of with most of us is we're worn out and then we're not parenting from our values. We're yelling. We're throwing up these punishments that we don't even want to enforce.
Right.
So one of the things I do when I first work with parents is I have them set up what I call a parenting avatar, which is basically the idea in their mind of the parent they want to be. And I help them figure out how would you want to respond? If everything were going well, how would you want to respond? And I help them become really comfortable with their parenting avatar and have them come up with plans, again, proactively. And I have them fill in this very simple statement. When my child blank, I will blank. So they decide ahead of time how they're going to respond so that when they're busy and exhausted and worn out at the end of the day, they already know how to respond, because if they respond from the energy that they're in that moment, they regret it. So again, it's putting together a really simple plan ahead of time for how you're going to respond. So in the moment when you're exhausted, you just don't have to think as much. That's a trick for that.
So when my child blank, I will blank.
Very simple tool. Yep, that's it. When my child blank, I will blank. And then when you decide this ahead of time, especially if you figure out the things that trigger you the most, and in the moment, you just follow through with your plan. You're not doing any thinking. It takes very little energy. You just follow through. And the more you practice this, it actually starts to become second nature.
You also talked about curiosity.
Yes. Curiosity is a big tool, especially, again, with teenagers, because we tend to, when we think about their behavior, we're very judgmental. We say, oh my gosh, why did they forget their homework again? Or why are they staying up till 2 o'clock again when I just told them last night to go to bed earlier? And we're very judgmental. But if we actually switch our tone from judgment to curiosity, very powerful tool. And instead of saying, why did they do that? We can say, why did they do that? With curiosity. And that's where we figure out the reasons for behavior. Well, they did that because they don't have the executive functioning skills to be able to go to bed earlier and still get their homework done.
Yeah.
So that's another really great tool.
Yeah. Or even on time. We have a consistent bed schedule, and somehow if you don't tell them to go to bed, they just keep going.
That's exactly right. Yeah, because often they're more task-oriented. Adults tend to be more time-oriented, whereas kids and teens tend to be more task-oriented. So that's why they may not even know what time it is. They're involved in the task. That's, again, the way their brains work. Yeah. So whenever I understand the brain really well, whenever you understand what's causing behavior, it's so simple to start to change behavior.
And I love this coming from this curiosity. Curiosity, I feel, is a heart word. Heart-centered word. Judgment is the mental part. So you got the right brain, left brain, and just the word curiosity makes my body tingle, because it just feels so yummy. It comes from that love part. And I know you and I talked a lot about this off camera, off screen, that if we can just, I think it's first to get connected to our heart.
100%.
Right. Yeah.
The problem is I find that our busyness and our overwhelm almost prevents us from connecting with our own heart.
Yeah.
And so then we approach our kids from this other place, and it creates this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Where then kids sense that, and it goes downhill, and then it overwhelms us more, and then we're even less in touch with our hearts.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I could not agree more with you.
Yeah, because then there's this power struck. I'm right, they're wrong, and then we're all in our head. But then if we just take it down to our heart and just feel and let our heart bleed out the love, you realize there's no right and wrong. We're just all here trying to love each other and help each other grow.
Absolutely. And I always say to parents all the time, you and your kids should be on the same team, not against each other. You're the authority on that team, but you need to be on the same team. A lot of teens, when I was a therapist, would say things like, I know my parents love me, but they don't really like me unless I'm doing what they want me to do. Mm-hmm. They like me more when I'm getting good grades and I'm friends with the people they want me to be friends with. But if we're parenting from our heart, our kids believe that we like them and love them no matter what. And a lot of kids are struggling in that area, I will tell you.
I agree with you on that one, definitely. Parents have so much expectation. I mean, coming from an Asian family, that hands down. We are expected to be a certain way, do certain things, and if we're not, we are bad children. Mm-hmm. So you have resource for us. Tell us about the resource.
Yeah, so the resource is just about how to motivate better behavior by using more long-term strategies instead of that Bandaid parenting I was talking about. And that's just on my website at rachel-bailey.com/responsible behavior.
Okay, so that's Rachel-Bailey, that's spelled BAILEY.com. So Rachel is spelled RACHEL-BAILEY.com/responsiblebehavior.com. Oh, no, there's no .com at the end.
No, it's rachel-bailey.com/responsible behavior.
Got it. Okay. And so what would they find there?
So what they'll find is what we traditionally do to motivate responsible behavior tends to be more exhausting. And so that resource talks about why it doesn't work and what we can do differently so that our kids feel better about themselves and still do what they're supposed to do, because they do have to do homework and get out of the house in the morning. So it really gives a different approach to parenting that will save you time and energy and actually improve your relationship with your child.
Now, you have a podcast. What's it called?
It is called Your Parenting Long Game. Again, it talks about how to really motivate responsible behavior, but also improve kids' resilience and their self-esteem by focusing not on the reactive parenting, but on the proactive parenting. And in every episode, I give a really actionable tool that you can use to become more of a long game, proactive parent and have more energy.
I know you're on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram also under the same name, Rachel Bailey?
It's mostly on Facebook, it's Rachel Bailey Parenting. On Instagram, it's Rachel Bailey Parenting. And then I do have a YouTube channel. And I think if you search for Rachel Bailey Parenting.
Okay. So thank you so much for being on the show, Rachel.
Thank you for having me.
Lots of wonderful tips. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Listeners, until next time, always be learning and always be growing. Thank you so much for joining us today. Go to parentpumpradio.com and click on the pink box on the top of our homepage to listen to our new and archived shows. To be instantly notified of new episodes, subscribe to our RSS feed. The RSS feed button is located at the top of the page where all our shows are featured. And after listening to the show, go to parentpumpradio.com or our Facebook page to leave your comments, questions, and topic suggestions. Until next time, have a wonderful week.